last week, and I was discussing about the Sophist conception of justice. And I explained you maybe the weakness of this conception, since the Sophists pretend that there is nothing else in justice than lawfulness. Justice and lawfulness are just the same. Justice and legality, lawfulness. Now, it doesn't mean, I told you, I have to sit a little lower. Oh. Yes, because if I sit too high, one cannot see me on the ekrán, so I sit a little lower. And as I told you last week, it doesn't mean that the Sophists were criticizing the law. Of course, they pretend that the law doesn't derive from neither from a metaphysical conception of justice. It's just a human creation, but they wouldn't say, not all the Sophists would say that the content of the law doesn't matter. They were aware that the law must find its authority somewhere, even if it's justice is just lawfulness. And so they pretend that the authority of the law is founded either on a convention, a covenant, or on utility of the city. For instance, if we take Antiphon, the Sophist, he pretends is this text which is part from the Oxyrhynchus papyrus, that the authority of the law derives from a convention. So it's a convention, not like the modern social contract, but something which looks like a social contract. So the citizens agree to obey to the laws. And this is the first origin of the authority of the law. It is a convention. But other Sophists prefer to derive the authority of a law of its content. They pretend that the law must be to the utility of the city. But one must look, when it makes a law, to the utility of the city. This is the point of view which Protagoras expounded, especially in the dialogue Protagoras. I explained you the myth of Protagoras last week. So Protagoras pretended that, of course, what is just is what is legal. Legality, lawfulness, and justice are just the same, but it doesn't mean that the content of the law doesn't matter. The content of the law matters because the content of the law must be ordered to the utility of the city. And now, sometimes the Sophists are merging the two justification of the authority of the law, either convention or utility. It depends on the Sophists. Now, I explained you, I think, fully Protagoras' myth last week, so we can go further. And I would like to insist on the differences between Protagoras and Plato. Plato went later. He was Socrates was 20 years younger than Protagoras, and when Socrates died, Plato was about 25 years old. So Plato was a writer which is who wrote mainly in the 4th century before Christus, while Protagoras was of the 5th century, between 500 centuries before Christus, 5th century before Christus. Now, you know, all of you know that Plato wrote a very famous dialogue, which title is The Republic. The Republic is the way we translate in French or in English the Greek title, but the Greek title is Politeia. We'll have to write it, maybe. And Politeia in Greek, it means constitution, but it has a broader sense than constitution in French or in English. It can mean law, constitutional rules, but also habits and manners. So it's all the legal system. So we could think that Plato followed the same path than Protagoras. He was busy with the laws, and justice for him would be the laws as it is for Protagoras. But this is not true, because the Politeia, the Dialogue Republic, has a subtitle. In the subtitle is justice, on justice. The Republic of Plato has a subtitle, it is on justice. This is not a subtitle Plato gave to his book, but it is a traditional subtitle which appeared in the old time, in old Greek times. And why is this subtitle important? Because it means that Plato was not satisfied with the Sophist view that the justice is only lawfulness. According to Plato, justice is an intelligible form. It's a transcendent notion which cannot be confused with the human laws which which are enforced in the city. So the first task to somebody who is dealing with a city, with a political problem in a city, it is to find what is justice, and then how laws can be inspired by this justice by itself that would be previously defined. So there is a difference between Plato and somebody like Protagoras, although they appeared not exactly at the same time, but both in Athens in old Greek times. So Protagoras was dealing with the law of the city, the laws of the city. He was refusing the idea that it would be an ideal definition of justice, an intelligible form of justice, a metaphysical justice, which would be beyond the positive laws. He didn't believe in the truth. There was no truth by itself. You know, man is a measure of all things. So it means that man is a measure of the laws of justice, and the justice depends on who makes the law. Everybody has its own conception of justice. Every city has its own conception of justice. So the justice is not the same in Sparta or in Athens or in Thebes. It depends on the city and depends on the lawmaker. But it doesn't mean that the content of the law doesn't matter. The city must look for what the lawgiver in the city must look, the lawmaker in the city must look for what is useful for the common good of the city. And Protagoras, as I told you before, was a friend of Pericles, the prominent politician of Athens in the 5th century before Christus. And Pericles asked Protagoras to go to south of Italy in the city of Turioi. This was a Greek city, a Greek colony. And Protagoras was given the mission to be the lawmaker of Turioi. So he did laws in Turioi, which were law he thought were which were for the common utility of the citizens of Turioi. On the other side, Plato, some years later, he built in his books an ideal city. An ideal city after he had defined the justice as an ideal conception, which we will precise later. So you have two kinds of legislators, of lawmakers, we can say, like, you know, the Janus god, you know this Janus? Like Jane in Tarzan, Janus. He had two faces. So there's one face, it is Protagoras, which makes law for a real empirical city, Turioi, and he tries to be empirical, realistic, and to find laws which are for the common good of the city. And on the other hand, you have, on the other side, you have Plato, which imagine an ideal city with laws which must reflect an ideal conception of justice. This is two ways of being a lawmaker, two different ways to be a lawmaker. And one is empirical and limited to human condition. This is Protagoras. And the other support an ideal form of justice, a transcendent form of justice, from which the laws must be deduced. So at the same time, not exactly at the same time, but almost at the same time, you have two conceptions of justice and laws and two conceptions of philosophy of law, let's say like this, which were born in the same city, Athens. One practical, empirical, this is Protagoras. The other ideal, transcendent, this is Plato. But for the reasons I told you before about, it is Plato's conception of justice which prevailed, because the works of the Sophists, Protagoras' works or other Sophist works, were neglected by the posterity. And it's only in the 19th century with Hegel that the Sophists were recognized as important thinkers. But before, they were forgotten. We are not explaining now philosophy of law, Plato's philosophy of law, but I can remind you or explain you something, a text in the Republic. The Republic has 10 books, and it's a big work. And in the second book of the Republic, in the beginning of the second book, there is a tale, a legend, which is very famous. It is, let's say in English, Gyges legend, Gyges tale. You heard about this? The Gyges legend, this is very famous. Now, the Gyges legend was the following. According to Plato, Gyges was king of Lydia, an African countryside. And there was discussions about the way he became king. Some pretended he became king with fraud and violence. So there was a legend against this Gyges, which was known, and this legend was the following: an ancestor, a Gyges ancestor, he was a shepherd, and he found in a hole, he found a horse made of bronze. A horse made of bronze, a statue, and this horse made of bronze had doors inside. And the shepherd opened one of the doors, and he found a golden ring. A gold ring he found. And he put this ring on his finger, and he discovered that when he turned the ring, he was invisible. He couldn't be seen. So he used this power that the ring gave him to seduce the king's wife. And then, with the help of the king's wife, he killed the king, and he became king instead of him. So why is this legend in the Republic? It is one of the character of the dialogue, a guy whose name is Glaucon, and this Glaucon, he was in the real life. Glaucon was a brother, Plato's brother. And this Glaucon, he's praying Socrates to justify the need for justice. He says, since justice is something, one of the most beautiful things in the world, it must be something which will be searched not because only of its consequences, but by itself. Justice is something which must be cherished, which must be looked for, not because of its consequences, but also because of itself. Because the most beautiful things are things which are not only beautiful by their effects, their consequences, but they are beautiful by themselves. And this is the case of the justice. So in order to convince Socrates to justify this about justice, he tells this tale, Gyges tale. Because what does it mean, Gyges tale? It means that if you can be freely unjust, if you are unjust but nobody can catch you, you are not going to be just. So it means that justice, which would be defined, which would be praised only because of its consequences, this is not enough, because you cannot answer anything to somebody who explains you that you have no reason to be just if you can be unjust without consequences. If you can go to bed with a beautiful girl and the husband cannot surprise you, why would you mind? If you can kill the king and become king instead of him, why would you mind? The problem, you have not to be caught. That's Antiphon said in on the truth, in the Papyrus of Callicles. He said the difference between nature and law, it is that law has consequences if you violate the law and you are witnessed. Before witnesses, you violate the law, you have consequences. You are going to be punished. But nature, if you violate the nature, the consequences are by themselves. It doesn't depend if you are witnessed by somebody or not. But if you violate the law, the consequences are only if you are surprised, you are witnessed by somebody. If you violate the law and nobody sees you, it doesn't matter. This is what Antiphon the Sophist explained. And the tale of Gyges legend shows this, because in this tale, it shows that nobody could convince himself to be just if he had the opportunity to be unjust without being surprised and punished. So Glaucon said to Socrates, you have to explain me to justify that justice is something which must be looked for by itself and not only by the consequences. And this is an allusion to the Sophist thought, because Protagoras, he supported the view that there is no truth, so there is no justice by itself, but justice must be, even if justice is nothing else than lawfulness, the law must be looking for the common good of the city. So Protagoras, he was supported a conception of justice in which justice must be praised because of its consequences and only because of its consequences. It's a pragmatic conception of justice. And the weakness of this conception of justice, this is the Gyges legend. The Gyges legend shows that justice must not be praised only because of its consequences. It must be praised by itself. If it's only a question of consequences, so you must do justice because it will be for the common good of the city, for instance, you have no way to prevent somebody to be unjust, provided he won't be caught. So you have to justify that justice is by itself, without regarding to the consequences. Justice is by itself something which must be praised. So you have to convince the people that justice must be praised by itself, because it's something beautiful by itself, that is something good for oneself and not only for the others. This is another way of explaining the thing. If justice is just for the common good of the city, if you have the possibility to be unjust without consequences, you are going to be unjust. But if when you are unjust, it's not against only the others, but against yourself. You won't be unjust. It means, but we are going to explain this later with Plato. It means that if you are unjust, you are not damaging only the others, you are damaging yourselves, because you are acting in a way that your mind will be in disorder. So you are being unjust, you are not being unjust to the others, but to yourself. This is Plato's demonstration in the Republic. You must observe justice. Justice must prevail, because somebody who is unjust is not unjust only to the others. He doesn't inflict damages only to the others. He inflicts damages to himself. He inflicts damages to himself because he has a troubled mind and he is unhappy. It means there is a disorder in his mind, and he will be caught by remorse, and he will live very painfully. This is the conception of Plato. If I want to tell you about this conception in a few words. So the whole demonstration of the Republic is to show that justice, being unjust, is not only something which inflict damages to the others, but it inflicts damages to the one who is unjust. But this is Plato's explanation of why justice should be praised, but not the Sophist explanation. In the Sophist explanation, justice must be praised because it's useful, because it is a covenant to respect justice, for one hand, to respect the laws, and for on the other hand, justice must be praised because it is for the common good of the city. Yes, but if you have a lawmaker who can do whatever he wants, why should he be just to his citizens? And also another problem in the sophistic conception of justice, it is the following. If you have only, if you support the view that lawfulness is justice, you must acknowledge that in the empirical world, in the historic world, there are a lot of lawmakers, who are not acting for the good of the city, of the good of the community. And nevertheless, the Sophists pretend that the laws are just, even if they are not for the common good of the city. The Sophists should convince the lawmaker, the rulers, to make law for the common good of the city, for the common good of the citizens. But if there is somebody who doesn't want to listen to them, what would you respond? Because the Sophists, they say that lawfulness and justice is just the same. That's why Plato, in the Republic, not only defended justice by itself, but explained that there must be some conditions in a city in order that justice will prevail. Justice can only prevail if the rulers of the city are wise. So it means that justice will prevail only if philosophers are the rulers of the city and not anybody. So sophistic conception of justice, according to Plato, is weak because it legitimates justice only by its consequences and not by itself. And this is the objection of Geiger's legend, okay, which is on the beginning of the second book of the Republic. And moreover, sophistic conception of justice is weak because you cannot exclude the fact that in historical cities, sometimes the lawmakers don't take care of the citizens. They don't make laws for the common good, but they do what they want, and they try to be they try to make laws for themselves, in the interest of themselves and not on the citizens. So if you have not an ideal conception of justice and a clue to make justice prevail in the city, it's not enough to say that, like Sophists like Protagoras, that justice is based on utility, or like Antiphon, that justice is based on a convention, on a covenant. This is not enough, because it doesn't it fails, this conception of justice fails in front of Geiger's legend. And the problem is the sophistic conception of justice was so weak that it led to excesses. There are some sophists, or people who are not even sophists, who used the sophistic confusion between lawfulness and justice to criticize the laws of the city. This was a dangerous conception. It was not the view of the sophists, generally speaking. If you take, for instance, Antiphon, he just, in his book, The Truth, on the Truth, he just writes that there is an opposition between law and nature, because law is only derives from convention, and nature is by itself. The law derives from the will of somebody, the lawmaker, and violating the law has only consequences if you are caught. If there is no witness, you can violate the law, it doesn't matter. But if you are going against the nature, there will be consequences. It doesn't depend on if you are caught or if there are witnesses or not. Going against the nature is always bad. But going against the law is bad only if you are caught by somebody else and if you are punished. This is what Antiphon writes in the papyrus. So the purpose of Antiphon's purpose is not to criticize the law of the city, but the opposition he makes open a way to other thinkers to criticize the law of the city. In his text, there are all the elements which are needed to criticize the law of the city, even if Antiphon does not make it. And this, what happened with some speeches which are very famous, and we find in the Plato's dialogue. In these speeches, people were criticizing the law of the city, and by the way, they were jeopardizing the city, the democracy and the city. The first speech, we find it in Plato's Republic. It's a speech from a guy whose name is Thrasymaque. Thrasymaque, maybe in English. He was a sophist. Now, this guy is depicted by Plato as somebody somewhat nervous, somewhat excited. So he's giving the speech in the first book of the Republic. The first book of the Republic, in the first book of the Republic, there is discussion between Socrates and other people who are there about what is the definition of justice. And there is a guy, I don't remember his name, who told Socrates that justice consists in rendering to each its due. Justice consists in rendering to anybody, to everybody, to each person its due. And Socrates is not satisfied with his definition because he doesn't know what is due to each person. So there is discussion about this. And then the guy who gave this definition of justice, which he borrowed to somebody else, because it's a famous definition of justice. Justice is just to render to everybody, to anybody, its due. It's just a definition you find everywhere. This is a common definition of justice. So Socrates shows it's not satisfying because nobody knows what it means to render to somebody its due. What is due to somebody? So Socrates shows this definition is weak. And the person who is discussing with Socrates says, yes, you're right, Socrates. I thought it was easy to define the justice, but I see it's not much more complicated because this definition of justice, which I gave you, which I borrowed to a poet whose name was Simonide in English, probably. This is a definition which is weak because when we try to apply it, we encounter some difficulties. And at this point, this Thrasymaque says, haha, this is Socrates' irony. You just ask questions. You just ask questions and you don't answer yourself. Now you have criticized this definition of justice by Simonide, but you do not propose anything else. You are just ironical. And this is your way of discussing with people. You're trying to embarrass them, but not to help them. And this is okay. And Socrates says to Thrasymaque, oh, I'm sorry, Thrasymaque, I didn't want to embarrass the person with who I was discussing. I was not satisfied with his definition of justice. But maybe you, Thrasymaque, have a definition of justice. You could help us. And this Thrasymaque is somewhat self-conceited. So he's very eager to show the others that he knows what justice is. But since he's a sophist, it's not so easy. So he says to Socrates, you have to define me justice. And don't tell me that justice is utility or is interest or something like this. I don't allow you. Give me a definition of justice which is convincing. And Socrates says, my dear Thrasymaque, you pray me to define justice, but you act just like you would like me to define the number 12, but you forbid me to tell that 12 is 3 multiplied with 4, or 2 times 6, or 6 multiplied with 2. You don't allow me. So you tell me you have to define justice, but you forbid me the way to define justice. And Thrasymaque said, so I told you, this Socrates, he tries only to embarrass the other people, but he has no answer. And then Socrates says to Thrasymaque, but maybe you have a definition of justice. I would like to hear it. And Thrasymaque answers something like this: you have to pay for it, because I'm sophist and I don't give advices kostenlos without paying. I'm not free. So you have to pay. And Socrates says, I'm sorry, but I have no money. And the others says, who are there, they say, we are going to help you, Socrates, we are going to pay in order to hear Thrasymaque's definition of justice. So Thrasymaque, in the end, he agreed to give his definition of justice. And he said the justice is nothing else than the advantage, the utility of the strongest. This is what is justice. Justice is the utility of the strongest. And so Socrates answers, I'm not sure I have understood what you meant. For instance, there is a guy who is a wrestler in Athens. His name is, what's his name? Polydamus, maybe, Polydamus. Well, anyway, this wrestler, he eats a lot of meat in order to be strong. He eats a lot of meat. So it's useful for him to eat meat. So since he's the strongest, because he's a very famous wrestler, it means that to be just, we must eat a lot of meat. So Thrasymaque says, you are just ridiculous. You know perfectly, I didn't speak about Polydamus, the wrestler. I told you the strongest in a city, they are the rulers of the city. The people in a democracy, the elite in an aristocracy, the tyrant in a monarchy, and this is the ruler. And the ruler, he makes laws for its own interest, laws which are useful for him, and not for the others, not for the citizens. That's why I say justice is what is useful, what is the interest of the strongest, because the strongest in a city, it is the ruler, and the ruler, he makes law for its own interest. It doesn't take care of the citizens. Now, this is the consequences Thrasymaque draws from the sophistic conception of justice. If justice is only legality, justice is only lawfulness. Well, in the city, there are rulers, and they are making laws, and these laws are what is just or unjust, okay? They are the determination of just and injustice. But in fact, actually, what happened in a city, the rulers are always making law for their own interest. They don't care they don't care of the interest of the subject of the citizens. They are not interested in it. So it's even not philosophy of law. It's just factual, you know. This is how the things are happening. This is how the things are happening. The rulers, the lawmakers, they are making law in their own interest. They don't take care of the citizens. So this is not philosophy of law. This is, I don't know, if you go to a cafe on Assas Street and you are discussing with somebody who is drinking his coffee, and we say just the same, you know, Macron is making laws to be richer and all the same, you know, and we pay, we are happy taxpayers, and we pay taxes, and we pay taxes, even more taxes, and it's always the richer who are becoming richer. The wealthier are becoming wealthier, and we are still poor, and we pay taxes. And it's always the same, you know. The rulers are always the same. They are not interested in us, we people. We are interested in themselves. This is not philosophy. This is just a café de commerce. So this is the speech, Thrasymaque's speech. And at the end of the speech, because the speech is a little long, there's discussion with Socrates, he says, and it is not that this is the reality, but it should be like this, because it's very stupid to be just if you can be unjust. The rulers of the city, they are right to make laws in their own interests, and the citizens who are supposed to be to obey the law, to abide by the law, justice is to abide by the law. So the citizens are just when they are respecting the law, they are abiding by the law, but they are just fools. They are naive, they are fools. The people who are clever, it is the rulers of the city, they are the rulers of the city who are making law in their own interest. It's fine like this, you know. The citizens, they are just fools, they must be crushed. There's no problem with this. The best, the cleverest, the one who must be praised, they are the rulers of the city who are making laws in their own interest and presenting them, these laws, like justice. This is clever. This is nice. So he's praising, at the end of his speeches, he's praising injustice. He's saying that injustice is much better than justice, because justice is just for the fools. It's just the weak, the citizens who are obeying the law, who are abiding by the laws, and they are just fools, but they have to be fools because the clever are the ones who are making the laws and making the laws in their own interest. So this is not philosophy of law, of course. It is just a fact, according to the Thrasymaque's. But it's a dangerous speech because it's an attack against the law. An attack against the law. It means the law has not to be respected, because the one who makes law, he makes law in his own interest. So law has not to be respected by itself. Law is not in the interest of in the good of the city. The law is just what is what is good for the ruler. So you think, well, if this is the justice is only what is in the advantage, the interest of the ruler. We should be rulers instead of them. We have enough. We don't want to be fact all the time. So we are going to do something to get the power and make laws in our own interest. And this is how the revolutions are starting, yes? So this is very dangerous because the Thrasymaque speech is an attack against Athenian democracies and against the laws of the cities. It means the law has not to be respected. The law you must respect, you must abide by the law because you have not any other choice. But it depends on you to have another choice. You have just to take the power. So this is the first speeches to which the sophistic conception of justice led. This is the first excess, the first speech of amoralism, which is in the Republic, and is from Thrasymaque. This is the first speech, which is an attack against the law. So there is another speech, which is very famous. It's a speech in another Plato's dialogue, which title is Gorgias. I told you about this dialogue earlier, and we are going to speak about the Gorgias speeches, the speech of somebody whose name is Callicles, and we are going to speak about the speeches after the break, 10 minutes break. Find Plato's Republic on Perseus and on Gutenberg, but I didn't like the translation in Gutenberg, so I'm using what I told you in the first book of the Republic. It is this definition of justice by Simonide, who says justice is to render to each its due. So how can I make this? You see here? This is Polemarch who is discussing with Socrates. They are gathered somewhere in the house of an old man whose name is Cephales. And this Socrates discussed with Cephales if he's now happy because he's old and he cannot have girls like earlier, and how he's spending his life and all this. And Cephales says he's very happy to be without girls and not having to flirt with girls because it was he lost a lot of time with this, and now he thinks he has accomplished his life how he wanted to accomplish his life. And somewhere Socrates asks Cephales, isn't that meaning you were just? Isn't what you are speaking about is not the word justice, because Cephales says, well, he was correct with everybody and things like this. And Socrates says, what does it mean? Does it mean that this is justice? And Cephales answers, look, now I have to sacrifice, I don't know what, a dog or a goat, or I don't know, something. I'm busy, so I leave you now. But there is a guy who is younger who is here. It's Polemarch, and he says, this is indeed justice, because Simonide said that justice is to render to each his due. You see here. You see on the blackboard? No? I must make the letters bigger. Now? Still not? Now? Again? You can read it? Simonide says, and rightly, about justice, that is just, Simonide said, it is to render to each his due. And so the discussion goes on because Socrates says, what does it mean to render each his due? What is the due? What is due to each? What is due to each? For instance, if you have you borrowed a sword of a friend, and you have to give the sword back, but your friend has become crazy. Are you going to give him back the sword because he can hurt himself or hurt any somebody else? So it is it just to give back the sword? There is a problem. Marx said, yes, I must acknowledge there is a problem. And then what about enemies and friends? Have you must we does it mean to render his due to enemies? Does it mean that we must be bad to enemies and good to friends? Marx said, I would say this is justice. But Socrates says, look, imagine you have a horse, and this is a horse who is a bad horse. He is wicked. And you are going to beat him. What do you think the horse will become? That the horse will be even more wicked. He will be more dangerous. So it's not good to your enemy to make something bad, because he will be worse. So there is a problem with this definition of justice from Simonide, because Simonide didn't tell us what exactly it means to give to each its due, his due. What is the due? What is due to all the to each? What does it mean, due? And this is the problem of this definition. And this is a very common definition. It was a common definition in Greek times. It's a common definition in Roman times. It's a common definition today. If you open a law book, the first year, what is justice? Justice is to render to each his due. Now, just the purpose of Plato in the first book of the Republic is to show that this definition is not enough. This definition is weak, because nobody knows what the due is. And this is the time in the first book when Thrasymachus interferes and says, well, you see, this is Socrates. Irony, Socrates' irony. He just says that the definition is dissatisfying, but he doesn't suggest any other definition. He's just annoying people because he wants to annoy people, but he doesn't want to help people. No, that's the beginning of the discussion between Socrates and Thrasymachus, because Socrates says, well, I would be very glad to give a definition of justice, but the problem is I have no definition of justice. It's not I'm behaving like a donkey, you know, the donkey who is pretending he's pretending to be stupid to get some food, you know. It's not like this. I'm not a donkey. I'm not behaving like a donkey, but I don't know what is justice. But you, Thrasymaque, you know maybe what is justice, because you are so clever and so clever-minded. And this is the beginning. Then Thrasymaque says, look, justice is what is in the interest of the stronger. Minute. One moment. No, this is here. This Thrasymaque interferes. How characteristics of Socrates? That's your ironical style. You refuse to answer. You don't say what is justice. You just say you are not satisfied with the definition of justice which was suggested. So, and then Socrates answers, well, you are so clever, Thrasymaque, tell us what is justice. We are looking for justice. Tell us what is it. And now, well, Thrasymaque was eager to give his definition of justice because he's self-conceited. So he just wanted to hear Socrates addressing to him to tell, give me a definition of justice. And this is the beginning of Thrasymaque's speech. Listen, Thrasymaque speaks. Listen, then, Thrasymaque said, I proclaim that justice is nothing else than the interest of the utility, it depends on how you are translating the Greek word, than the interest of the stronger. And now, why do you not praise me? But of course you won't. And so this is important in the way of Socrates is always reasoning, because Thrasymaque gave a definition of justice. Justice is what is in the interest of the strongest, but he didn't give any definition of the strongest. So the definition is weak. And this is what Socrates answers. Let me first understand you, I replied. Justice, as you say, is the interest of the stronger. You can read, or this is too little characters. I have to make letters bigger. No, it's okay. Justice, as you say, is the interest of the stronger. What, Thrasymaque, is the meaning of this? Just be precise. You cannot mean to say that because of Polydamas, the wrestler, Pancras, this is a wrestling sport in Athens. Polydamas, the wrestler, is stronger than we are and finds the eating of beef conducive to his bodily strength, that to eat beef is therefore equally for our good, who are weaker than he is, and right and just for us. It's just for us to eat meat, beef. Because the strongest, Polydamas, the wrestler, he eats a lot of beef. So we have to eat a lot of beef too to become just. And of course, Thrasymaque says, you're just making me ridiculous. This is not a way of discussing. You know perfectly, I was not thinking about Polydamas. And Socrates says, well, who are the strongest? Could you be more precise, please? And this is the answer. Have you never heard that forms of government differs? There are tyrannies, democracies, and aristocracies. This is the classical distinctions of political regime in Greek times. Yes, I know. And the government is the ruling power of each state, certainly. And the different forms of government make laws democratical, aristocratical, tyrannical, with a view to their several interests. And these laws, which are made by them for their own interest, are the justice which they deliver to their subjects. So what is justice? It is what the rulers, it is the laws the rulers are making, and the rulers are making laws for their own interest, and not the interest of the citizens. It doesn't depend on the political regime, either a tyranny or a democracy or an oligarchy. It's just the same everywhere. This is factual. This is a statement. This is a statement. Yeah, there are people who are becoming richer wealthier because they are making laws in their own interest. And you are fact. Yes. So I'm recorded. I must be careful. Now we're going to speak about Trump and Putin. You know, this is the description of Trump and Putin. They are making laws, they are making rules, international rules in their own interest. This is what Thrasymaque describes. This is the fact, this is a statement. In the beginning of his speech, Thrasymaque doesn't say that this is good. He just says, this is a statement, this is the reality. But then afterwards, at the end of his speeches, because there is a discussion with Socrates, because Socrates is going to show Thrasymaque that the art of governing, the art of the ruler, it's a proper definition of the art of governing is to govern in the interest of the subjects, the citizens, and not in the interest of the rulers. He demonstrates this to Thrasymaque. I'm not going to go to the details, but Socrates gives other examples. He says, for instance, if you are a doctor, you are practicing your art not to earn money, but the interest of your patient. We say patient in English? Yes, in your patient. If you are a horseman, you are educating your horse in the interest of the horse and not in your own interest. If you are a commander of a ship, you are sailing in the interest of the ship, the whole ship, and the seaman, and not in your own interest. So when there is an art by which somebody has a superiority on the others because he's commanding, he's acting in the interest of the people to which he commands. And Thrasymaque said, yes, yes, yes. And suddenly Socrates said, and what about the art of the government? Is it different? It's an art too. So Thrasymaque, yes. So he has to acknowledge that the art, properly speaking, the art of government is in the interest of the subjects, the citizens, and not in the interest of the rulers. And so the definition of justice by Thrasymaque is just umworfen, we say in German. It's just tossed. It's Socrates has showed that this definition of justice is inaccurate, because the true meaning of an art, whatever art it is to be in the interest of the people to whose the art is applying, and not in the interest of the guy, of the person who is practicing his art. A doctor, he is practicing his art in the interest of the patients. Commander of a captain of a ship, he is practicing his art in the interest of the ship and the sailors, sorry, not sailmen, sailors, and so on. So what Thrasymaque pretends is justice is not in accordance with the definition of an art, whatever is the art, even the art of governing. So Thrasymaque must acknowledge that he was wrong. So he cannot acknowledge he is wrong because he is a sophist, and the sophist must always have the last word. So what he says in the second part of the speech when he insults, of course, Socrates, he says Socrates is a sycophantus. Sycophantus, this is an informer. Because in Athens, there were people who were stealing, how we saw, fruits, figs, maybe in English. There are fruits on trees, and these fruits were very appreciated. And so there were people who were stealing these fruits. Like today, there are people who are stealing metals and things like this. So there were people, other people, citizens, who were specialized in informing the authorities of the robberies. And so they were called sycophantes. So Thrasymaque said to Socrates, you are just a sycophantes. So she's just insulting Socrates. And it goes on. And suddenly, when Socrates shows that Thrasymaque's definition of justice is incompatible with the proper definition of an art, whatever this art is. And we had got to this point of the argument, and everyone saw that the definition of justice had been completely upset. I looked for the word. So just upset. Thrasymaque, instead of replying to me, said, tell me, Socrates, have you got a nurse? Why do you ask such a question? I said, this is here. Why do you ask such a question? I said, when you ought rather to be answering. Because she leaves you to snivel and never wipes your nose. She has not even taught you to know the shepherd of the sheep, from the sheep. So he's just insulting Socrates, saying that Socrates is dirty. He doesn't wipes his nose. His nose is dirty because he doesn't want to answer. So he's looking for an answer, and the time he's looking to an answer, he's insulting Socrates to find an answer in the same time. And this is the answer he gives. You are wrong because look at the shepherd and the sheep, sorry. The shepherd, he doesn't the shepherd, he doesn't look after the sheep in the interest of the sheep. He looks after the sheep in order to eat them. So this is the real art of governing. This is here. So you didn't know about the shepherd and the sheep, because the shepherd, he is busy with the sheep in order to eat them. So, Thrasymaque comes back to his definition of justice. Justice is the interest of the ruler, because this is a statement. And so in this last piece of his speeches here, he's explaining that this is a statement that the rulers are making laws in their own interest. This is a statement. So he's throwing the definition of the art of governing. He says this is not what is interesting. The reality is that the rulers are making laws in their own interest. But he's going further in this last part of the speech, because he's explaining that that's how the rulers are making laws, and this is nice. But because justice doesn't pay, it doesn't pay off justice. The citizens are just when they are abiding by the laws. And by abiding by the laws, the citizens don't get any benefit to it. They are just suffering. They are called just, the rulers are calling justice to abide by the law. And the law are made in the interest of the rulers. So the citizens, they are, by abiding by the law, they are just, it means they serve the interest of the rulers. And who is clever in this situation? The rulers are clever. The others are just cretin, idiot. They are fucked, and it's very good they are fucked, because they had to be the rulers instead of the rulers. So if they want to be clever, they had to be the rulers. That's all. Just like Trump, it's just like the same. Hey, Zelensky, you give me all the rare earth you have on Ukraine, and Zelensky says, okay, you are going to protect us because Russia tries to invade our country. No, get fucked, just as the Europeans. This is just the Thrasymaque speech. There are no rules. There are only the rule of the strongest. So the last part of the Thrasymaque speech is a praise of injustice. It's a praise of injustice. It's better to be unjust than to be just. But because justice doesn't pay. Justice is in the interest of the other. The other, it is the ruler. When you are just as a citizen, you are just acting in the interest of your ruler. That's all. And this is nice. So this is Thrasymaque's speech. Now there is a speech from another guy in the Gorgias. It is the speech of Callicles. And this is a speech, the speech of Callicles, who goes even further than Thrasymaque. It's even worse, because for Thrasymaque, this is just a question of statement. This is the reality. You can't do anything, but this is the reality. The rulers are making laws in their own interest, and what you are not going to think how it ought to be, because it is like it is, and that's all. Nevertheless, at the end of the speech, in the last part of the speech, he is saying this is not only the reality, but this is fine. And this last part of Thrasymaque's speech announces Callicles' speech. And Callicles' speech, it is in the Gorgias, another dialogue of Plato. And this Callicles is presenting the situation in another way. He says, like all the Sophists, that there is an opposition between nature and law. Nature and law are opposing themselves. This is a classical assertion of the Sophists. Now, what does it mean? So then comes the explanation. But the explanation, this is Callicles' explanation, not all the Sophist explanation. So Callicles says, nature and law are opposing, because how is it in the nature? In the nature, the strongest are winning against the weakest. The lion eats the cows, and the tigers are the strongest, and that's all. So the strongest are winning in the nature. And it's not only animals, says Callicles, it's also people. Look now, for instance, when Xerxes, the king of Perseus, he invaded Greece, and on which right did he invade Greece? He just said, I'm the strongest, so I'm invading Greece and I want Greece for me. That's all. That's how the things are working in the nature. The strongest wins against the weakest. But now, says Callicles, in a city is different. In the city it's different because the weakest are making the laws. And since they are afraid of the strongest, they are making laws in order to prevent the strongest to decide. So they are making laws against the strongest because they are afraid of them. This is a way, according to Callicles, to explain the opposition between nature and law. In the nature, the strongest are leading, but in the city, it is the weakest are leading because they are making law in order to restrain the strongest. This is the first part of Callicles' speech. And then comes the second part. There is a turning point in his speeches. Then he says, but look, what is happening in nature, this is the right of nature, the law of nature. It's not only that the strongest are winning against the weakest. It's not a fact. It's not only a fact. It is justice. Justice is that the strongest are winning against the weakest. So he presents this nature where the strongest are winning against the weakest. He presents it as a law of nature, right of nature. And he says the problem in the city, it is that this law of nature, this right of nature is not respected because the weakest are making the laws. So what we must have in a city, it is somebody who is strong or a few people who are strong. They are going to take the power and they are going to show the weakest how it must be ruled, you know? So it's a direct attack against the law of the city and the democracy. Enough with the weakest, with the strongest, we must take the power and rule the city. Because we are the strongest, we are the best. We are the strongest, we are the best, we are justice. Yes?
But who do they think are the strongest? Does he mean like the citizens? Because I don't understand. The strongest and all have the power.
So it's a critique of the democracy. In the democracy, there are a lot of people. A lot of people, most of the people, they are citizens, they are the weakest.
So
Yeah. The strongest, there are some aristocrats, some people who are believing in their power, and they are going to impose their strength. So it's just that the people want, these people who are the strongest, according to Callicles, they cannot do what they want in the cities because they are laws. So they must reverse these laws of the cities and install the law of nature when the strongest, in the law of nature, the strongest are deciding. And the weakest, it means the numerous people of the city, the oi polloi, we say in Greek, the people who are many, these citizens, they must be crushed by the strongest. This is the law of nature. The law of nature is that the strongest are crushing the weakest. If you want, I can find you this speech. Could you be silent, please? I find it in the Gorgias is a very long dialogue, so it could take time to find it. going to see if I can find it rather quickly. At all. This is Perseus. Gorgias. No, in Greek, English. Okay, this is English. This is the beginning of the work. So it's in which, sorry, because I have the, I'm going to find it rather quickly. This is the beginning of the speech of Callicles here. You see it on the blackboard? Of the letters are too small. This is the beginning here. It begins like at the same. So Callicles is aggressing with Socrates. So you're just clever. You just ridiculize Gorgias and then Polos because they had not the guts to answer to you. I'm going to show you what is the reality, and you're going to shut up. This is the way of speaking. So they made mistakes because they were weak, but I'm not weak, and I'm going to show you what is the truth. So now this is the beginning. Oh, he's insulting him a while. So he's showing that, it's not a good translation. This is not very clear. So he says there is an opposition between nature and law. In nature, the strongest are dominating, but in the city, the weakest are making the law. This is just, in the beginning, it's just a statement. But then, a little later, he says, but look, what is happening in nature, this is the real justice, the justice of nature, the law of nature. So the strongest must dominate the weakest. This is not only the fact in the nature, it's a law of nature. There is a turning point in this speech because in the beginning, he speaks about an opposition between nature and law, which opposition all the sophists are making. But then he's introducing another idea. He says, but look, what is happening in nature, this is the real law. This is the law of nature. So he's saying something that Antiphon, for instance, didn't say. He's saying that what is happening in nature, which is in contradiction with the law of the city, what is happening in nature, this is the law of nature. And the law of nature, it is that the strongest are dominating the weakest. So now things must change in the city. It means things must change in the city, and the strongest must dominate the weakest. So this is an attack directly to the democracy. But there is a difference between Callicles' speech and Thrasymaque's speech. There are two differences, and I'm going to end with this. Sorry, I must end now. So I have to show you next time the difference between Callicles' speech and Thrasymaque's speech. And it will takes 5 minutes, and afterwards we are going to speak about Socrates. Now, for today, it's enough. So, and I will make my possible to put the written lectures online next week. But this is not a promise. This is just a goal. Thank you. Bye-bye. So these texts, I recommend you to read them because they are very important for your personal culture, and they are very classical, very famous texts. Okay.